Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. My voice is a little off. I just finished a 5K, and I don't know why it's so bad, but today I wanted to talk about APPEs and choosing them. On Friday, I was at Drake University, and they have a really cool thing. Not all schools do this, where preceptors can come in, talk about their sites, and students do kind of a round robin. I want to say there were probably 40 different sites there, and this serves a number of purposes, just from school perspective, where the alumni get together. My wife was a Drake alumnus, and I get to see other people that I'm in touch with. Mike Kasab of Kasab Consulting, Jenny Meyer of Ankeny Pharmacy, and the GRX Medicap, the Iowa Board of Pharmacy, the Iowa Pharmacy Association, Hy-Vee's Fulfillment Center was there for a management rotation. See who else was in tables next to me. I saw Montrose Pharmacy from Winterset, Iowa, and a number of the biggies. The big thing was that it's all about connecting, all about kind of getting an idea of what's going on. And what I wanted to talk to you about was, how do you pick your APPEs when you are in October, November of your P3 year? And I can't exactly make it right for 3-year schools, but you get the idea. You're about 3/4 done. And you have to choose these for 4th year, and you don't necessarily know what you want to do with your pharmacy life. So what I want to give you is some advice about kind of what I heard in terms of feedback from the students, but also from my perspective, having been out there for 20 years and been a preceptor for, since I was a preceptor at Maryland too. So I've been a preceptor probably most of those 20 years that I've been a pharmacist. So let's start with kind of dividing it into something that makes it manageable. We'll divide it into retail, residency, and other. And it's a false trichotomy. It's not split up that way, a third at all. I believe it's 25% residency, or when you talk about how many students do it. And then the rest is not residency, whether it's retail or something else. So while in school you're going to feel like you need to do a residency, and often students would come up and it's like, no, I don't really want to do a residency, almost apologetically. That really isn't how it's supposed to be. It's really, what are you interested in? How can we help you get there? So let's start with the retail side, because that's what I did when I graduated. I had absolutely no interest in a residency. And this is 20 years ago, when maybe they weren't it wasn't such a thing. And it was the first time we had a PharmD class, so an all PharmD class. So it was moving from where 20 PharmD students would graduate that might think about residency to only having 105 or 110, certainly a much larger number than before. The big thing with retail, I think, is management and ability to implement clinical programs. And that's really different than managing patients within a clinical program, and I'll explain the difference. So let's start with the management side. PharmD MBA is possibly the best thing that you can get. I know that Drake, for just a couple $1,000s more, you end up with a dual degree. And I hate to say PharmD MBA, because many times it's MBA PharmD, where they have their pharmacy background, but really they're more interested in the MBA side. And I see this over and over again, that just because the PharmD was 4 years and the MBA is traditionally 2, that somehow the PharmD gets first position. So the first thing, I think, at the retail, especially with what we're seeing with 32-hour hires, is that you should be looking at, are you interested in a management position? And even if you are not, you are still in a leadership position, because as the pharmacist, you still are possibly over the techs and maybe some of the other pharmacists. So the first recommendation I have is to get that second degree, especially if it's an MBA and that's in your interest. there is no substitute for getting out there with other people that are business-minded, understanding what it is to motivate and work with people. RX Radio had a great episode where he talked to a pharmacy supervisor where you can't just go into your own store and, maybe fill in for somebody that didn't come in or something like that. You're trying to motivate, 18 stores or 15 stores worth of people, and it's completely different thinking. And I think an MBA program is one of the best ways currently to get that thinking. And that's definitely what I would have been after if I had the MBA as an opportunity. It wasn't so separate. But right after school, going right back to school wasn't really a thing for an MBA, because an MBA requires a certain amount of time. I did take classes, but I wasn't interested in the MBA. The other half of it is showing that you are able to implement clinical services. And this does not mean able to work with clinical services. And let me tell you what the difference is. So a lot of the MTMs, like Marixa and Outcomes, you get a certain number that come to the store or something like that. And you need to call the patients, and some of them will say yes and some of them will say no. Now, as a non-owner, you're like, okay, well, they didn't want it, so we just move on to the next patient. As an owner, though, you think, okay, well, they said no. Let's start looking at the reasons why someone would say no. Is it that they didn't want it, or is it that it was presented at a time in such a way that it's likely to get a rejection? And what I mean by this is, when you're calling, certain people are going to call and get a really high rate of success where many patients want to work with them, and then other people are going to get very low rates of success. And this kind of goes to a little bit towards introvert-extrovert, where someone who is naturally extroverted is going to just be much more comfortable talking one-on-one with people, and someone who is naturally introverted may not be as comfortable. But there is a huge problem in terms of how we communicate as a generation, and I'm talking about the 24, 25-year-olds that are coming out. In my day, back in the day, you would actually, to talk to someone at college, you would call their hall phone. That's a single phone that's in the middle of the hall. Whoever's closest to it would pick it up, say, hey, who do you want? And then they would go down to the person's room, see if they're there, bring them back to the phone, and talk to them. That's obviously, with everyone having their own phone now, it's very different. But in general, we don't really use phones as phones. We use phones as devices to text or to share pictures or to share messages. So to ask somebody who is traditionally working within texting and emailing and images to say, I need you to perfect your articulation of why MTM is important to a patient in a phone call. So I think Blair's book, the MTM book that she has, is amazing. That's really something you'd want to look at in terms of scripts. But when you hear the word script, you think fake. You think you're acting. Well, let's go even further back, which is MTM good for a patient or bad for a patient? It's good for a patient. It's good for a patient to have more close monitoring, make sure on the right medicines, make sure that they're taking their medicines. So it's good for the patient, but that doesn't mean that the patient perceives it as good. And you don't have a ton of time in that phone call to articulate the value of it. And let me give you an example of what is absolutely wrong to say, or what it absolutely will get a high failure rate. Hey, I'm calling from such and such pharmacy. You're eligible for MTM. We just wanted to see if you were interested. All right, well, what is MTM? You just gave me an acronym. I have no idea. It sounds like it's going to take my time. I'm just, I'm going to put the default and just say, no, I'm not interested at this time. But what if someone called you and said, hey, we have this free clinical service to you that allows us to better improve your health. Would you prefer a daytime or an afternoon appointment by phone? You don't have to come into the pharmacy. We'll call you, and just what time would be best for you? And so they're answering the question, when's best for you, not do I want to do it or not. And the scripts, what they do is they allow you to make sure you say the right things in the right way, because you actually are getting in the way of the patient's health if, because of the way that you say things, you get it wrong. You say it in such a way that allows them to easily turn down better health care. So your ability to articulate numbers, for example, let's say you go to a retail interview and you say, hey, I implemented MTM and I changed it from a 20% enrollment rate to a 60% enrollment rate. A district supervisor will immediately know what that means to them and what that means you can do. That means that, wow, this is somebody who takes the lead, can convert potential customers, potential patients into the system to get better outcomes for not only the store, for the patient, and then for the numbers for the doctors. So immediately, that's a plus on your side. So the other thing that you can also show is, hey, I'm not averse to flu shots. Flu shots are a thing. I get that it's annoying. I get that numbers are annoying, that metrics are annoying. But one of the first questions I got when I was in my retail interview was, how do you feel about the register? And what he was really saying was, are you going to say, I'm a pharmacist who doesn't touch the register? Where the conversation was very natural for me. I was like, yeah, I can see how the register is sometimes a barrier and uncomfortable for some pharmacists. But really, when we're at the register, that's the one time where I got to talk to the patients and was one of my favorite things to do. And then the next question was, how do you feel about the drive-through? Well, the drive-through is really convenient for patients that have kids. And so what he was getting from me was not, oh my gosh, well, I don't want to do drive-through. I don't want to do register. I'm a PharmD, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get a residency. This is my backup plan. It was the exact opposite. I want to be in the store. I want to be at the drive-through making it convenient for these patients that have children. I want to be at the register talking to patients one-on-one. And so when I presented myself, I was a good fit. And I had retail experience, and it just made sense. It's like, okay, this is a guy that it's going to make sense for him to be in a retail store. You can see that he wants to be here. And I was like, well, I only want to work 24 hours, and it ended up being 32. But that was kind of neither here nor there. But you could tell that I was in the place that I wanted to be, searching for the job. And then, going to Arizona from Maryland, I was saying, hey, I want an adventure. I appreciate you, doing this. And the awkward, well, how much am I going to make? The nice thing is that there's a contract and it has a number on there. So you both look at it and immediately the supervisor can see like you're happy with it, you're not happy with it. And instead of giving you the actual number, the amount that I made was over four times my entire pharmacy school tuition. So if your entire pharmacy school tuition was $120,000, $30,000 a year, that would have been equal to $480,000 a year that you were making. So my pharmacy tuition was so low, and my tuition rate relative to that was so high that it was like, wow, this is really great. I had made a great investment in pharmacy. What a good, pat myself on the back. What a good job I did. But I was just lucky that I was before the great expansion, the great exponential increase in tuition. Okay, so that's retail. What about residency? Residency, they're absolutely looking for in the rubrics for certain APPEs. If you say my goal is to eventually become a pediatric pharmacist after PGY1, then you better have a peds rotation on there. You want it to be before mid-year, but it won't necessarily be there. And I read an article that showed that your choice of APPEs isn't always correlated to your success in getting a residency. But what they really need to see is that you are a good fit. Okay, so if you, for example, have done a 5-week rotation, as Brandon Dyson from TLDR says, you can't have any better interview than that. So if somebody comes in for a single day long interview, but you did your APPE there, there's no better way to know if that was a good fit or not. They know you, you're a known commodity, you already know the system, especially if you did more than 5 weeks, one of those extended ones where you're doing like 20 weeks. So for residency, your CV needs to scream that you are PGY1. You have, if you're going to be an hospital internist, you need to have hospital experience on there over and over again. Should you have a part-time hospital job? In general, yeah, because they don't want somebody who's going to come in and say, yeah, I thought I wanted to work in the hospital, but I thought it would be better than retail, but it wasn't. So they're going to want you to have hospital experience in work life and in your APPEs. Now, I get it. You can't always choose exactly what you want, but what I want to caution you against, which many students do, is that they go location first. So they'll pick a location and then they'll say, okay, well, what can I do here at what times? Okay, and that's the big thing. It's tough. It's your 4th year. I don't get why you pay an extra 3 months of tuition if all of us preceptors are not getting paid, or we get paid like a stipend from some colleges. Some colleges will give like $400 or $500 per student. I don't ever see anything. I don't take a stipend. So you're paying more. You need to work more. You're basically homeless. You don't have a mailing address, really, maybe an electronic one, so it's not as big a deal. But the big thing, the big takeaway is if you're not going retail, you're going residency, your CV must match what you expect from a PGY1 with some kind of emphasis on what they want to do with their lives after. And that's a lot to ask of a P3. That's a lot to ask of somebody who's actively taking tests and like, hey, oh, by the way, pick the places that are going to lead you into your career. Last one is the other. So let me start with the MBA students. I think that was the biggest group I had. The MBA students really have such an advantage over everyone else because, and you don't have to be, I guess I'm just saying it's such an advantage to have 2 completely different paths. Right now in Iowa, I think our unemployment rate is 2%. That means that 98% of people are employed. So there are plenty of jobs. The biggest issue is how much did you take out? And do you have in your head that you have to make $100,000 to start, right? And the nice thing is that with certain loans, the way that they're set up, it goes by income. And I just figure that if you can take $40,000 or $50,000 to work a job as a resident, can you take $40,000 or $50,000 to start at the bottom in a business as an MBA student? And I don't really know if that's going to be at the bottom for very long because it's so hard to find good, knowledgeable people these days that I think it is the best time that you can possibly have to get into business, to get into other things outside of pharmacy. And you're going to need to because I just got a letter from a dean from a college of pharmacy. It was addressed to the entire, alumni base, basically saying, hey, it's going to be tough for these students. You should give to the school. And one of the reasons it's going to be tough for the students is because of the number of pharmacy schools. And while that seems counterintuitive, the schools are absolutely helpless when it comes to doing anything about the expansion of the schools. And I say that because what's happening is each school does what's best for them. So if they take the best students, then they take them away from somewhere else. And if they take too few students, then they're really hurting for money, and that hurts their own school. The only group that can possibly do anything about it is the accrediting body. And the accrediting body would be able to limit the number of site visits that they're going to do in a year. And they're going to say, sorry, we only do this many site visits. We don't do anything new. This is PTA, physician therapy assistant. Physical therapy assistant. They do that. They do, okay, well, this is the number of site visits we do. You're this place on the list. This is how many years you'd have to wait to open up a school or a program. And I think the same thing is true with OT, which is occupational therapy. The pharmacy accrediting body has said, we're going to let as many schools open as want to open. We're not going to be in the way at all. And that has hurt the schools. And the schools can't do anything. The schools would have to come together in a way that is unheard of to do anything about it. So I don't want to get too far off track, but in terms of picking APPEs, and you're looking at academic positions, well, academic positions are going to be going the opposite way. Where we had the rapid expansion, plenty of positions, now we're going to see the decline. Because as schools start to constrict, as fewer students start to go to the schools, there are less positions within the schools. And it's a little tough to constrict because there's so many specialty positions within the School of Pharmacy. And schools are going to really be looking for those people that can fill multiple roles. I don't know exactly how it would work because the roles are so unique. But fewer students, less tuition, less positions is what I expect to see soon with the schools. So if you're looking at academia, I would say that is going to be an even tougher road, especially as you're looking at, so graduating 1 year from now, then 2 years residency, maybe a year of fellowship. It's going to be pretty tough to do that. And you're going to have gone through 4 years school plus 3 years residency and fellowship. So anyway, that's academia. In terms of like managed care and things like that, I think that those are definitely opportunities that are going to be out there. But I think it's really a matter of just finding something that you enjoy that doesn't have to be in a pharmacy. We really have to get out of our heads that it has to be a pharmacy. So that takes me to my last one, which is just that you would be in some way an entrepreneur. As an author, I actually make enough now that with this new contract I just got, I'm pretty close to making, and I hate to say percent of pharmacist salary, but I'm about at 80% pharmacist salary just from writing. And that's not having like a job. That's if I left my job, which I don't want to because it's amazing. But I'm just saying entrepreneurship, finding what you love, starting to work on that while you're working a job of some kind or another, I think is really the future. Aaron Albert has talked about the gig economy and how 30% are going to be contract employees. As you're looking at putting in your ambulatory care services, it might be just 1 day a week. You're working 32 hours at the pharmacy because that's what they would give you for full time. And then maybe you work 8 hours at a doctor's office helping patients there. And that's kind of cool, a little bit of both. But you're really going to have to think outside the box. And that's what we're seeing from many of the schools saying, hey, our students were aware of the job market. We know what's happening. Regardless of, even if we reduced our incoming classes now, which the P1 years are starting to go down, I would say somewhere 15-20% per school, then we're going to see only a correction in terms of number of graduates in 3 or 4 years. So, and then we've got the new schools that just came out. So it's going to be bleak. It's going to be tough for a while. Things go in cycles, though. This is part of the process. But my recommendation is to think, if I wasn't going to work in a pharmacy, hospital, or retail, what would I do? And to be very firm about finding that position and looking and seeing what that position would look like for you. And I know you're saying, well, my APPEs have nothing to do with that. That's not true. You're finding that many APPEs, like I think Gary Christensen from Hy-Vee, he has a management rotation that's at the Central Phil. And that kind of rotation that I did in hospital administration, was a great one in terms of understanding the business from that side. But if you look at your degree as something that you'll have for 40, 50 years in terms of your work potential or work-life potential, then you think, all right, well, right now it's tough to get a retail job. Maybe I want one in 10 years. But right now I think it'd be better to stop going against the current. You don't have to be the salmon going up against the stream, getting eaten by the bear. You can just say, all right, well, there are in our country more jobs open than there are people to fill them. So we are in the best position you could possibly be in to get a job. Pharmacy is just not, the pharmacy jobs, traditional pharmacy jobs are just not there right now in some areas of the country. But I just heard from someone that Orlando market is looking for a number of retail positions. So flexibility where you can go, if you can go other places, there are some jobs in certain areas. I understand the rural areas are getting jobs and expanding jobs. But on the YFP network, we heard about Yuma, Arizona, adding a couple positions. So we're seeing some places are expanding, some places are contracting, and really it's just a matter of making sure that your skill set, if you're in retail, is one of management and one that can start clinical services. If you're in residency, you match what it looks like to be a resident wherever you're going to go. Your CV looks like a resident should. 3, if it's another one, start thinking entrepreneurship. Start thinking about working for yourself. Blair Thielemeyer, I had forgotten this, and then I started talking to her about her book, and she turned down a hospital pharmacy directorship to be an entrepreneur or to remain an entrepreneur. So plenty of opportunity out there as long as you're not going to pigeonhole yourself into a single place. So again, I would put preferences, like I would ideally be a retail pharmacist, do a residency if I have to, and then something else if neither of those worked, or in some order or another. But just keep yourself flexible and open. Plenty of opportunities out there to do work. Maybe it's not going to make what a pharmacist does, but start thinking long term. Start thinking, all right, well, if I stayed with this company for a while, what does it look like? Or if I got these skills from this company, moved to another company, what would it look like? So, all right, well, have a good weekend. I'll do pharmacy news double time next time. I just finished this 5K, and I just wanted to stay in. So I'm in my car, like doing this on my laptop. But I'll talk to you guys next weekend, and have a good week.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.